Hey everybody, I want to do a quick video here on some common no start issues on classic cars. I'll be looking at a carbureted small block V8 here just for an example. And again, just kind of going through basic things that can happen when your vehicle's not starting. So stay tuned. First thing I want to go over is a kind of a basic terminology thing that will really help if you're trying to describe your issue to someone else. So if you turn the key and it does that, that is cranking. That is the engine cranking or the engine turning over. That is not firing. Firing, I'll show you here in just a second what that would sound like. So that is the engine firing or starting. You can have an engine fire and kind of almost start, not start, almost start, not start. That's one situation you could have if you're trying to explain that to somebody else. So for the first bit of diagnostics, you kind of have to figure out, is the engine cranking? If the engine is not cranking at all, then you're going to want to look at, first and foremost, your battery. Is the battery charged up? If the battery is not charged up, that's obviously the issue. You need to have a good 12 volts there for the engine to even crank or turn over. If you have 12 volts at the battery and it's still not turning over, then you start diving into, looking at, are you getting power from the ignition switch? Are you getting power sent down to the starter? Is the starter itself maybe bad? That's not really what this video is going to be about. This video is more about if the engine is cranking but not starting. So again, we're going to pretend here that this car is cranking but not firing. So the first thing I always look at is to see if we're getting fuel or not. A couple ways to do that. First thing I do, pop the air cleaner off so we can see down in the carburetor. And then this may be really hard to show, but I'm going to try. You should be able to push your throttle right here, and you should be able to see fuel. Yep, you can see down in the barrels. You can see it shooting fuel down there. So that quickly, we've eliminated that it's a fuel issue. So basically when you're dealing with any vehicle like this, you're going to have fuel, air, or spark. Those are going to be the three things that can keep it from starting. You can pretty much take air off the table. In all my years of doing this, I've never seen air be the issue. All that means is basically that the engine is getting air. As long as your top of your carburetor here isn't 100% blocked by something, you don't have a plastic bag over it or something stupid like that, then air is not going to be the issue. You've just narrowed it down to spark and fuel. So in that case, in the instance that we just had, you can look down in the carburetor, you can pump the gas, and you can see that fuel is shooting down into the carburetor. So we know on this vehicle, this would not be a fuel issue. Another way to determine that, if you pump the gas, you can't see that there's fuel going down in there, you can't lean that far into the engine compartment, is you can take a little bit of carb cleaner or a little bit of starting fluid, shoot it right down in the top of the carburetor, and then hit the key again, crank, and see if it tries to fire on the carb cleaner or the starting fluid. If it does, if it burns that and then dies, then again, it's not a spark issue. If it's able to burn the carb cleaner or the starting fluid you just shot down in there, then obviously it's getting spark. So at that point it's a fuel issue. So then we would start looking at easiest answer is usually the right answer. 95% of the time when we have a vehicle that we're cranking on and it's not getting fuel, 95% of the time it's out of gas. That's one thing I would definitely preach with this, is typically the easy answer is the right answer. Not cranking, 95% of the time your battery's weak. Cranking but not starting and you're not getting fuel, 95% of the time your car is out of gas. Stop what you're doing, go buy 5 gallons of gas, pour it in there, and then you have to have the understanding that it is going to take a while for the fuel to pump all the way from the gas tank, which in most vehicles is in the back, fuel lines all the way down under here, up along the frame, and then work their way up to the top of the engine and fill the bowls on the carburetor, and then actually start putting fuel into the carburetor to fire. You can kind of help that along again with a little bit of carb cleaner or starting fluid. Spray some carb cleaner or starting fluid down in there. While when the engine fires, you can pump the gas, help that fuel work its way up from the fuel tank to the carburetor. Another thing is, if your vehicle has an electric fuel pump, then you can cycle the fuel pump a few times to help it bring that fuel up. And all that means is turn the key on to accessory, don't crank the car. Turn the key on to accessory, you'll hear the fuel pump run for a few seconds, then you'll hear the fuel pump shut off. Turn the key off, turn the key back to accessory. Do that 3 or 4 times. Let that electric fuel pump do the work of bringing the fuel all the way from the back of the car to the front of the car. And then hopefully with a few pumps of the gas while you're cranking, you should be able to get it to pop off. I'm going to move to this car because this will be easier to show on here. But so we get a car, it's cranking. It will burn off starting fluid, but it's not getting gas. You've put gas in the gas tank. You've cranked on it for a while. You've primed it with some carb cleaner and some starting fluid. It's still not firing. What I would start looking at that point is your fuel pump. So step number 1 to me is to figure out whether you have a mechanical fuel pump or an electric fuel pump. So a mechanical fuel pump is on the engine. It's mounted to the engine block. You can see it right down there with the 2 fuel lines coming out of it. 1, 2. It's right there. We are at the front passenger side of the engine block. That is where most of them are. I have seen them on the driver's side, but that's where most of them are. Again, I can't get a real good view of what that looks like, but I'll post a picture of it on there as well. Here's another one, small block Chevy, again, passenger side front right there. That's your mechanical fuel pump. Another thing you might have that would be nice is some people will put a fuel pressure gauge right in line. So as you're cranking, if your fuel pump is working, that should start jumping up 1, 2, 3, 4. You should see it start to jump up there as you're cranking. If not, that's a pretty good indication that your fuel pump is not working. Another thing you might see, I've been trying to find one in here that has it, but a lot of these cars will have filters, fuel filters in line like that, but some of them are actually clear so that you can see it filling up with fuel. So again, if you're cranking on the car, you have fuel in the gas tank, and it's cranking and cranking and cranking, and you're getting no fuel into that clear filter, then again, pretty good indication that your fuel pump's not working. So I'll put up a couple pictures of what electric fuel pumps can look like and where they can be. But basically, I've seen electric fuel pumps mounted on inner fenders right up here. I've seen them mounted along frame rails, under the vehicle. Sometimes they are in the tank or right next to the tank. But with an electric fuel pump, if you look around on the engine and you don't see a mechanical fuel pump anywhere, then you have an electric fuel pump. And with an electric fuel pump, when you turn that key on, you should hear the electric fuel pump run. Might be kind of quiet, but you should hear it run for 2 or 3 seconds, and then it should shut off. Typically, some of them run constantly. So you might hear them, you turn the key and you just hear a little vibration. That's your fuel pump running, and some of them, again, will just run forever. So if you can turn the key on and you hear your fuel pump working, then it's probably, the electric fuel pump's probably fine. I have seen them where they're making noise and just not moving much fuel. So that is a possibility. So if we've determined that the problem is not fuel, so you pump the gas, you can see fuel shooting into the carburetor. We've eliminated that as a possibility. Then the other possibility is going to be spark. With spark, there's a lot more stuff involved. Again, this is a basic diagnostic video, so I'm not going to go super in depth, but I'll show a couple ways here to test a couple things to kind of narrow it down. So basically what we're going to be looking at here, you've got your distributor. On GM products, the distributor's in the back. On Ford, they're on the front. If you've got the distributor, you also want to locate your coil, which on this car happens to be right next to the distributor. The center wire on your distributor cap will run to your coil if you're having trouble finding your coil, because again, I've seen them everywhere. People mount them on the front of the engine, the firewall, back of the engine, inner fenders. They put them all over the place. So, but the middle wire coming out of your distributor will run to your coil. The other things in that system that you're going to have to think about are going to be your spark plugs, spark plug wires, and the ignition itself. Again, not diving in super deep into all of that, but just showing a couple things you can test here to kind of narrow down what's going on with your vehicle. So if we've narrowed it down to it's not fuel, it's spark, then the first thing I want to do is pull a spark plug. Any of them are fine. Any of them that, spark plug wire I should say, any of them that are easy to reach. And then basically you're going to take a screwdriver, put the screwdriver into the end of the plug wire, and then you want to find a good spot with something metal where the screwdriver can sit. Sometimes this is a little difficult, but where the screwdriver can sit and you have a little gap between the metal of the screwdriver and the metal of something else. So that cap there, valve cover sometimes works. Sometimes you can run it over here and set it on a brake line or a metal inner fender. Again, anything metal that will allow that spark to jump. Basically what we're going to do at that point, which this may take 2 people, but you want to have somebody crank on the engine and you want to watch, and you can listen. There should be a spark jumping from your screwdriver to this cap. Every second or so you should be able to see a spark and hear that spark popping as you crank the engine over. If you do that and you have a spark right there, then you've basically eliminated spark from the equation, because you know you're getting spark all the way to the plugs. So the only thing it could be at that point is the plugs themselves, which again, pretty rare that is the case, but it happens. So you want to take the correct spark plug socket, take a spark plug out, check it. If they're wet or they're completely black or the electrodes are worn off or something like that, then it may be as simple as throwing a new set of plugs in it and then going from there to figure out why they're shot in the first place. Are they just old, or is the car not tuned right, so it's flooding and it's fouling out the spark plugs? If we hook this up the way I just showed you with the screwdriver, you crank it and you're getting no spark, then now you know for sure spark is the issue, and you can start working your way backwards in the system. So again, plugs and wires themselves are not typically the issue if you go from your car runs one day and it won't start the next day. Typically at that point you're going to be looking at something in the distributor or the coil itself. So at that point, if you're not a little more mechanically inclined, you might have to get somebody else involved, but at least you've narrowed it down for them at this point. But a coil, that's a fairly common thing to go out. You can certainly look up how to test a coil. If you're getting power to the coil that you should be getting and it's not putting a spark out, then you know the coil's the issue. Another way to kind of narrow that down is you can pull the center wire out of your distributor, pull it out, do the same thing you just did with the spark plug wire, put a screwdriver in it, ground it, crank on it. If it's not sparking, then that means your coil is not working. You've kind of eliminated the distributor as the problem and narrowed it down to the coil itself. If your coil is sparking, that means your distributor is getting spark. You test your spark plug wire down here and it's not getting spark. Now you know the problem is within the distributor itself. It's either the distributor cap, the rotor, the points. I've seen the distributor themselves go bad. Sometimes the shafts break. Sometimes they have a distributor pickup that might go bad. A handful of things in there that could be the cause. The nice thing is with most distributors, you're talking $100 to $200 to replace the entire thing. If you're the type of, I'd rather just throw parts at it than figure out the actual issue, that is an option at that point. So yeah, that kind of lets you know how to narrow those things down. Let me put this car back together and I'll do a little summary. All right, so quick summary here. Again, if I were walking up to this car, I crank it, it will crank, but it will not start. The places that I start with are pull the air cleaner, I'll shoot a little carb cleaner down in there. If it fires on the carb cleaner, then I know I'm not getting gas. And then I start looking at, number one, am I out of gas? Number two, if I know the car has gas in it, then why is gas not getting from the fuel tank to the carburetor? Do I have a mechanical fuel pump? Do I have an electric fuel pump? Are they working at that point? So if that's not the issue, if fuel is not the issue, then you know spark is the issue. And then I'm going to start trying to figure out, why am I not getting spark? So I like to start at the plug and work my way backwards. Again, pull the plug wire, do that screwdriver test where you ground it to metal and crank, see if you're getting spark. If I'm not getting spark at the plug wire. Then I work my way backwards, pull the coil wire off the distributor, do the same test. If I'm not getting spark there, then it's the coil. If I am getting spark there, then I've now narrowed it down to the distributor itself. Distributor cap, rotor, points, the distributor itself, distributor pickup, something in that system you've now narrowed it down to. And then you can decide if you're mechanically inclined enough to go any further than that, or if you need to get a mechanic involved. But at least at that point, either way, you should be able to tell your friend who's a mechanic or whoever else, hey, I've narrowed it down to I'm not getting fuel or I'm not getting spark. And I'm not getting spark, it's something with the distributor because I'm getting spark from the coil. Okay, so I hope that can help somebody. If you guys have anything to add, any helpful tips, any tricks that you've done over the years, we'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching.